Good morning and welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to discuss something that kind of hits a little close to home, and it's about navigating loneliness. Just a little bit of background. I grew up with my parents were Italian immigrants. They came over from Italy in 1962, and they were the typical old-fashioned Italians that, everything was kept very nuclear. Everything was very family oriented. As a child, I really wasn't allowed to hang out with other kids unless it was very supervised. Never was able to sleep over a friend's house. Somewhat sheltered. And also, my dad came over from Italy. He was in the border patrol in Italy, pretty cushy job there, and ended up, since he didn't speak the language and needed to be able to work right away, started working as a laborer in the construction industry. So he'd be working, pretty much 6 to 7 days a week. My mom ended up getting a job working in the hospital as a nurse's aide, but she was working evening shifts. So when I started school, I can remember as far back as the first grade, I'd go to school, I'd walk to school in the morning, went to a little Catholic elementary school, and after school I would walk home. I had a key to the house. My dad was gone working. My mom had already just left for work. So I would let myself in and pretty much learned how to entertain myself, keep myself busy. So I was always pretty comfortable with being alone. As I got a little bit older, once I got into high school, I had some friends and stuff, but still pretty much kept to myself. And then I joined the Air Force, went over to Japan. Yes, had friends, but again, the common theme there was being alone. And so I've always found myself, I'm very hobby oriented, besides being into the fitness thing. I always found hobbies that I could do by myself, like photography or graphics on the computer, a lot of things that you just did by yourself. And I've always been really comfortable with that until recently. I've been married twice, and first time got married in Japan to an American dependent, and we were both very young, probably had not given a lot of thought to the whole marriage union process. So needless to say, we had a couple of kids, but it did not work out. And so one of the things I would suggest to younger people today is really spend time getting to know that person that you are planning on spending the rest of your life with, and talk about things that go beyond just the norm. Talk about what's your idea of raising children, what's your idea of your economics, what's your idea of where you want to settle, because all those things come into play later on, and if you haven't really given them a lot of thought to start off with, they can be sticking points later on. So after that relationship didn't work out, became a single parent and spent the majority of my time concentrating on raising my kids, not giving a lot of thought to relationship. So again, went right back to being alone, and kept busy enough to where, the whole loneliness thing never really entered into the picture. Never thought that I would get into another relationship again later on in life. I guess I was in my early 50s when I finally met somebody that I thought I could do it with again, and kind of went through the same issue there. You get that initial spark and you get together, and you don't really give a lot of thought to what's this going to be like once the honeymoon phase is over, or do we see eye to eye? And that's on me. That's not on anybody else. So I'm not coming down on relationships there. But after that one didn't work out, I realized that the majority of my life has been spent in the gym. And, it's good and bad. It's good because through necessity from work and everything, I've taken care of myself. So physically, I'm pretty healthy. and capable. But I found myself over the last few years navigating this void of loneliness. Because granted, I see the same people 2-3 times a week, and I've built these relationships with my clients, and I'm very blessed with that because, I count them as my friends, but it's limited to work. So when I leave work and I go home, it's just me. Or recently, the last year, I got myself a pet, and he's great company. We spend a lot of time together, but it really doesn't replace the stimulation that we get from interacting with other people. And since I've always been a loner and alone, I've never really gone out of my way to, I'm really realizing how much of this is on me. So I've made a concerted effort over the past year or so to, even when I'm at work, even if it's not a client, to engage with other people in the gym, whether it's, be aware of something that they've done and comment on it, let them know, wow, that was really great, or pleasantries, talk about sports, talk about this, talk about that. And I realize how much it has made a change in my life. I'm finding myself wanting to know more about other people and kind of want them to know more about me. I guess we crave connection and we crave community. And I think we all want to be seen and we all want to be heard. And even not from a selfish standpoint, but I realize sometimes when you acknowledge somebody, when you reach out to someone, even if it's something trivial like just, how's your day going? Haven't seen you in here in a while. I realize sometimes that makes such a difference for people in their day. I mean, we don't know what's going on in somebody's head. Just recently I went to Italy. Finally got a chance to take a vacation. I went over there with my sister and my brother-in-law and spent 10 days there. And about halfway through the trip, I got a text message on my phone from this lady at the gym who, is a casual acquaintance up there. She knows some of my clients. And my clients knew that I was going to be out of town. But this lady, I hadn't told anybody else that I was going to be out of town. And I got this text message from this lady that was like, hey, I noticed that you haven't been up at work lately, last few days, and wanted to make sure everything was okay. And it really made me stop and think about how much I appreciated that, because here's somebody that, I say hi and bye to up at the gym. Nothing deep, nothing complicated. And somebody was actually wondering where I was, to the point where they reached out to make sure that everything was okay. And so I answered back immediately, and I'm like, yeah, I'm on vacation, but how nice it was. Thank you so much for taking the time out to ask. And when I got back to the gym, about a week or so later, I saw her and I was like, come here. And I gave this lady a hug. I'm like, you made my day. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know how to explain the feeling and the emotion there, knowing that you're on somebody else's mind, or you cross somebody else's mind. And so that was a good one. And it makes you realize how vulnerable you are, or how vulnerable you can be when loneliness, as opposed to being alone, comes into the picture. Because there's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. I've been alone and been extremely comfortable being alone. In fact, sometimes that's my preferred state of being, is to be alone and in my thoughts, in my actions, doing what I want to do. And I realized you can be in a crowd of people, and I'm sure this has been said before, because, I've been at work surrounded by tons of people and yet have that feeling of loneliness go through me. Conversely, being alone with nobody else around, being completely content. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make here, because this is super long-winded again, is that we need to address those feelings and act upon them, because it's so easy as we get older to discount the need for community and for connection and for the ability to be seen and to see other people and to be heard and to hear other people. So I think a healthy approach to that is sometimes step out of that comfort zone, or what we perceive to be comfort, because we either don't want to bother somebody else, or we're ashamed, or we're embarrassed, and take that step forward, because we could be doing something for someone else, something that we need done for us as well. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm making these videos, because I don't know if anybody's going to watch this. In the event that somebody does, I hope that they go, wow, okay, that struck a chord with me too. And if anybody gets any benefit out of it, just like the benefit that I'm getting out of it now by discussing it, because it's not a comfortable topic for me. I don't like being vulnerable. I don't like being, for lack of a better word, dependent on somebody else. But we need other people. We need that connection. So yeah, that's really, it's another rung on the ladder of being healthy in spirit and soul and mind and body, that we can address to make our lives a little more fulfilling or a little bit more complete. So that's all I got to say about that. Anyway, peace. Talk to you later. Bye.